Hi, I'm Marie Spalding with Living Felt. Thank you so much for joining us today. On our channel, we post video tutorials on wet felting and needle felting. And in today's segment, we're going to learn to wet felt over resist to make this sweet and simple wet felted vessel. Wet felting over resist is really a great skill to have. You can learn to make a great many things and get a little more complex and a little more interesting in your shapes. And by wet felting over resist, I mean some material that prevents the wool from felting to itself. We like to use something thin, but something we can feel through the fiber, and something flexible enough to roll. It also helps if it's water resistant, then it lasts longer. But there's lots of materials you can use for this. Once you've built that skill, you can start doing more complex things. I brought just a few examples today. Our little beanbag Santa is one, and Kitty Doorstop is also weighted. She's another. You might make a simple child's toy or a pet toy. You can make yourself a large wet felted hat. You can make a vessel of many different shapes and sizes. We also have functional items like a wet felted handbag. This is a very simple design with some textures added in. You might choose to make one with a flap, and this one has kind of a decorative flap. We have a kit in our shop for the basics of wet felting a purse. Over the last few years, people have had a really great time wet felting themselves a pair of slippers. We have a kit for that as well. Another example might be this wet felted pillow that I made for myself. It is weighted, and I made that for myself for during meditation time, kind of cozy. And in our next video, we'll learn to wet felt this cozy and warm pair of wrist warmers. So we'll do two different projects. The first one being very simple, a simple shape, small, and a simple design. We want it to have rounded corners so that you learn how to wrap the wool and felt the wool around the template. So even if you choose to make a square, go ahead and round out those corners, at least while you're learning, because this is practice really. And in this project, we'll use Living Felt MC1 batting. It's easy to handle, it's easy to lay out, and it'll make a nice stiff shape that holds the shape that you give it. And in the next project, we'll work with merino top because it's something that you want to have next to your skin. So it's a finer fiber and will feel better to wear. So two different projects, two different types of wool, and different ways to lay out. They're both going to be great fun, and I promise you'll love your end result. So thanks for joining us, and let's have some fun. Okay, we are all set up here and ready to wet felt our vessel. Today we'll be wet felting this very simple project, wet felting a round vessel over a resist. And the idea is to keep it simple, just get your hands in the wool and teach you how to wet felt over a resist. So hence we're going for just a simple circle and a simple design. The wool we're working with is a batting. It's Living Felt MC1 batting. It will create a vessel of a medium stiffness, so it'll hold its shape nicely. Also, it's easy to handle and easy to lay out, and you'll find that it wet felts really easily also. It needle felts or wet felts, so that's what we'll be using. We'll also need our template material or resist. We went over this a little bit in our introduction, and this is a 7-inch circle, so we'll be making a sandwich with the wool on the outside of this. And then we will cover it with our mesh to start, and that'll help provide a barrier between our hands and the wet wool. You'll need 2 pieces of this, one to cover the top and the bottom to start. We will be using olive oil soap. This is great for making the wool really slick but not getting it too sudsy. I'll be wetting out with a simple kitchen sponge, and we will be rolling in a bamboo mat. We'll need just a couple of towels. I like to use one for rolling and 1 or 2 to dry your hands, depending on how big your project is. This grippy shelf liner will be under our felting tray. I'll use just a standard boot tray to keep the water contained. This is a rigid mat, which we use in the fulling process to help kind of burnish the outside and rub the project on. And just a couple of simple tools. I like to keep a pair of tweezers around for picking out any vegetable matter. You'll especially notice that in batting or wool that's less processed than a top or a sliver. Some scissors and potentially an awl for poking our hole and getting that opening to move our resist. And then lastly, potentially just a simple razor for shaving the edge. If you have a kind of a fuzzy finish, then you can just smooth it down with a razor. And of course, we'll need some hot water, hot enough for your hands to be in, but no need to burn yourself. Some good hot water is all you need. So we're all set, ready to get started wet felting our vessel. Let's get going. The first thing we're going to do is divide our wool. I like to get it into the shapes that I want before my hands are wet, or at least approximately when possible. So this is a 4-ounce roll, and I want to divide it in half. I'm only going to be using about 2 ounces, actually a little bit less. But it's easier to tear it within the grain, and you can see that the fibers are kind of running this direction. So by folding it in half, I'm essentially just going to find the middle and tear that in half. And now I have a 2-ounce bundle, or 2-ounce batting. And now I'm going to divide this in half. Well, actually, I'm going to encase the template in this, and I probably won't need exactly half. So what we'll do is this. I'll see approximately how wide is that. That is about how much I'm going to need to fully encase it. And then I'm going to use a balance to do double on the bottom, and we'll add contrasting color. So now that I know that's approximately the size I need, I can just tear off this balance. Get your hands far enough apart, it'll just tear right off. And then I'm going to divide this evenly in half, just like we did before. So basically just find the middle, separate your hands enough, and then just pull, and it'll come apart. So I have 2 equal halves, pretty much 2 equal sides, and then the balance I'll do an extra bottom. But here's what I want to do is kind of get this just a little bit bigger than my circle. So use your hand to kind of hold the wool down and then pull it off. And if you get it essentially in the shape that you want it, once your hands are wet, you're not fussing with it so much. And not too much bigger, but a little bit bigger. And then we're going to just go ahead and divide the thickness. And you can divide the thickness before you tear it into a circle or after, whichever you prefer. And I'm going to repeat this for the other side until I have 2 piles, 2 equal piles, 1 for each side. Be sandwiched in here. And then I have some contrasting colors. I pulled these off already. This is Caspian. I'm going to mark, that'll be the top. This will be the top. And this is also Caspian. Now these were just cut from the batting as it is using a little template, and this is about half the thickness. And this is going to be a marker. I'll show you how I use that. So our wool's all ready. Okay, when we're wet felting a vessel, we have the opportunity to either design from the inside out or the outside in. So in this case, we're going to put color around the opening of the vessel, and I'm going to make that the inside. So we're going to put down the color first. First, I'm going to put down a little green circle for the opening, and then that's our bamboo color, and then this is Caspian. So those two are going to be on the inside. And then I'm going to put down 1 layer of the batting. And we're going to go ahead and wet this layer now. And so I'm just going to dip my sponge in my water. I've covered it with my mesh. And I'm going to go ahead and just apply that right to the center and wet it from the center out. I like to keep my soap just right on my work surface here. And I'm going to just add some soap to my sponge. And I am pressing all the way through. I'm pressing firmly. We're just going to wet this all the way out. You'll see different felt makers work in different ways, and this is the way I learned to create multiple thin layers. Of course, you could do projects that are much thicker than this. Okay, so I'm going to generally wet this with my hands. I also like to soap my hands. We're just going to press. We're not rubbing at all. We're just pressing the water through, and you can feel the edge of the template here. So I want this layer to be nice and soapy. And now we're going to flip it over, which will be quite easy. Remove this layer of mesh. And then we're going to fold this back over onto the template. So the mesh can kind of help do that. You can even use your sponge to further wet it. What you want is to hug it towards the template firmly. Now, you can also use your fingers in here, even though it's going to stick to it a little bit. Just guide it right around the template. We're going to work out any snags or any folds in this process. Just work it all the way in, get it to lay down nicely. And if it's just too thick, if it's too bulky, if it won't lay down, use your fingers and just pull off that extra. Okay, so this is nice and snug around our template. Now we're going to remember, just for the moment, that the opposite side had our color. That was our top, because that's where we're going to want to cut our hole. And that this side is the bottom. So this side is the bottom. We're going to lay down another layer, and now so far I'm laying down my wool so that what you can see is a grain. The battings are all mixed up, but what you can see is it's kind of running up and down, and then the other one will go side to side. So first we're going up and down, and then we'll go side to side, just to mix it up a little bit more. So we'll wet this layer the same way. We're going to press all the way through. And by doing multiple layers, it allows you to really wet them out and work out all that air, little bits at a time. And that's what we're doing. We're getting the fibers to come closer together. We're getting air out. The water is helping to remove distance between the fibers for the agitating. It also, since it's hot, it helps open up the scales so that as we begin to agitate, they have a better opportunity to interlock. And again, though, there's no rubbing at this point. We're just wetting and soaping. And by the way, I have not added any soap to my water. I find that having a block of soap right here is really all I need. Sometimes I might swish it in my soap to get started, but often not. This is my bottom. Flip it over and back to my top. And now we're going to repeat. Take off this top layer of mesh. Some people work with one layer of mesh and they fold it over, and I just find that I feel I have a little more freedom, at least in the beginning, having two layers of mesh. And now we want to go right up snug against the template again. And the mesh can kind of help you do that. If you're not comfortable doing that, just use your fingers. Pull it, smash it down. If you need more water, there's lots of water in there, but if you need more water, just gently put it on and get more soap. Get it laying down. Okay, this is my top, and it's the inside of my top. So I'm going to put down the last dark indigo layer. Now the grains are kind of running side to side. And this time I'm also going to put a little marker. So this marker right in the center is going to tell me where my hole is. So first I'm going to wet this out so I can find the template. And then we'll add that. There's a little piece of hay. We'll add that so we remember as we're massaging it and flipping it over all during the felting process, which one is the top. Gently, I'm really pressing very gently here. I'm not trying to mash everything all the way down flat. We need to shrink the wool a little bit before we can really be very aggressive with it. So I'm using a flat hand. I'm only pressing, and I'm not pressing that hard. I'm just trying to get the layers to stick together. But before I go on, I'm going to add this little circle essentially right in the middle, and that's going to tell me where my hole is, where I want to cut my hole, and it's going to help me remember what's top and what's bottom. Now, also as an option, you could create a little marker, and I'm going to show you what that is. I have these tiny little dots. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to put a tiny dot right there at the top, and hopefully it'll stay on as we felt. And just a little dot of wool to use as a marker. I don't usually do it, but I thought it might be a good idea in case you get interrupted in your project, so you know where you were in turning it. Just in case you get interrupted in the felting. I'll show you how we use that. So we are going to turn this and now put wool on our bottom. And now for this last layer, I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. The sides are already pretty thick. We're just going to go almost to the edge. And I'm going to make that a triple layer. Little green dot on the north and south.